If you got good loose soil like we do, harvesting ginger is pretty easy. I just try to work my garden trowel up under the roots, and then I pry upward, and usually the whole plant will pop up out of the ground at once. The ginger root that I planted was just some that I bought in the grocery store. I just stuck it in the ground and kept it watered, and it ended up doing pretty well. Here's a look at our harvest right after I pulled it out of the ground. And as you can see, there's a lot of soil that sticks to the roots, and the first thing I do is wash it off with a garden hose. Of course, I'll wash it again once I get it inside, but rinsing it off with a garden hose helps quite a bit. Gets a lot of that garden soil off and makes cleaning off the roots a whole lot easier. For trimming off the roots, I use the same little pruning shears that I use for pruning my tomatoes, and they work pretty good for this task too. Since I plan to peel these roots, I don't have to do a perfect job, so I just try to get rid of most of the roots. If you decide to use pruning shears like these, just keep track of where your fingers are, because they are sharp and they can cut you. Once all the roots are cut off, then it's time to cut off the stems. And for that, I just try to get it as close to the root as possible. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I just like to do as much out in the yard as I can. That way it'll require less work once I get in the house and start peeling them. It does take a little bit of time, but once you get started, it goes fairly quickly. And they look pretty good after you have them all trimmed up. Here's a look at our harvest after it was all trimmed up. Now it's time to take them inside and do some freezing. We cleaned it off some more indoors, and Tanya took a vegetable brush to it and got in as many of those crevices as she could. If you have anything that's really hard to clean, you can just break it in half, make smaller pieces. And then to freeze it, you can either freeze small pieces or you can peel it and grate it. And with the fresh ginger, you probably wouldn't even have to peel it, but I'm going to anyway just to clean it up a little bit. And to do that, I'm just using a spoon. Works pretty good, and you can even get down into some of those crevices. It'll just make for a cleaner piece of ginger to start with. I'm going to work on these, and then we'll come back and I'll grate some. One thing I thought I should mention, any areas that I find that have a little green, like right here, I'm just going to cut those off with a knife, being careful to cut away from me. Just like so. Okay, now that I have them peeled, I'm going to clean up a little bit, and I'm going to give these a quick rinse again, and we'll grate some. I'm going to just use this mandolin slicer to grate it. It's got a grating attachment, and I've seen chefs on TV use these without using the safety thing here, and I figure if they have something for safety, it's probably a good idea to use it. So I'm just going to go back and forth. I'll keep doing that until I get them all grated down. Let's see what we've got so far. That's a decent start. I was making too big of a mess, so I decided to put this thing up on the cutting board. It does a pretty good job once you get the hang of it. After you get a decent amount grated, then I just take tablespoon size clumps Put them on some parchment paper on a cookie sheet. Doesn't have to be perfect. There's quite a bit of juice in ginger. That'd probably be good healthy stuff for a smoothie. Then once I get them on there, I'll kind of form them a little bit with my hands. And then I'll pop them in the freezer, let them freeze solid. Then I'll put them in a bag, and that way I can break off individual pieces for later use. Whatever I think I need. I'll just kind of clump these together with my hands. Like so. Now I'm going to pop them in the freezer. I peeled a bunch of smaller pieces and I put these on a smaller cookie sheet with some parchment paper, and these pieces I'm going to freeze whole. Now that these are completely frozen, all you have to do is just put them in a freezer bag. And since they are frozen, they shouldn't stick together, and even if they did stick together a little bit, you could easily pop them apart, I'm sure. So you just fill the freezer bags, and then try to remove as much air as you can, and then they go back into the freezer until you're ready to use some. Here's our whole pieces of ginger, and like the grated ginger, we're just going to put these in the freezer bag, and since they're frozen solid, they shouldn't stick to each other, and they should be fine later on when we get ready to use them. Should be able to just pull out one or two pieces or whatever you need, and like with the grated, just try to remove as much air as you can before you put them back in the freezer. Here's a look at them ready to go back in the freezer. Before you go, be sure and hit that like button, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. See you next time.